If you're moving from Photoshop to Affinity Photo, you may be wondering how clipping works. In this video, I'll show you how to clip into shapes, text, and raster layers. First, let's look at shapes. I have this image of a galaxy here. Let's say I want to clip it into a star shape. Well, I can select my shapes over here. I'll choose Star Tool. I'll make a star. Now what I'll do is I'll move my galaxy image somewhere around my star. Now over here in the layer stack, I'll click my galaxy layer, and I'll drag it over the name star, and I'll let go. And now you can see it's clipped into the shape. And if I expand the star layer, you can see the galaxy is in there. And this is basically how clipping works in the Affinity programs. You can think of it more like a group structure. In Photoshop, clipped objects are above the layers they're clipped into, but in Affinity, they're inside. Now let me undo that. Let me show you a mistake you may have made. If you click Galaxy and you drag it over the thumbnail of the star, and then I let go, that does something else. That creates a mask effect. So if I move my image around, you can see it's masking the star. That's a different topic. Let me undo this. Just remember to drag your layer over the name of what you want to clip it into. So I'll drag it over the star again, and I'll let go there. Now if I select my star, I can move it around, and the image inside will move with it. If you want the contents inside your shape to stay in place, you can select Lock Children. For me, it's off the screen. I have to click this expanded arrow here. I'll select Lock Children. And now I move my star around. The image inside doesn't move with it. And if you want to put it back to normal, you can go back here and turn on Lock Children. But you can also move the image inside of it independently. So I'll select the layer here, and I can move my image around to the best position. I can also resize it and do all those normal transformation functions. Now this also works with arbitrary shapes that you create. So I'll select the pen tool. I'll just make some random shape here. I'll fill it in, although that's not necessary. And now with my galaxy selected, I'll just put it in the general area. I can click and drag it into my shape. And I can resize it so it fits the whole area. And there we've clipped into an arbitrary curve. And later on I can go back using the node tool. I can still modify it. So that's quite simple to do. Now let's look at text. And this won't take very long to explain because it works exactly the same as what we just saw with the shapes. I'll select the artistic text tool. This is the text tool that's optimized for short phrases, just a couple words. Let's say space, let's give it some type of font. And I can take my image, put it over the text, and I'll just drag it in. And there we have the image inside the text. And everything works exactly the same as before. I can resize it, I can move the image around. I can even change the text. So I'll select my text layer here, make sure the text tool is selected, and let's type something else. And if it doesn't quite fill the area, I'll just select my image here, make it a little bigger, and there you go, an image inside text. Now let's look at how clipping works with pixel layers. In Affinity, a pixel layer is basically a raster layer that you can paint on. So I'll create a new pixel layer here, add pixel layer. Then I'll select the paintbrush. And let me choose my brush type. I'll click brushes here. I'll select the dry media category. And let's select this one, gritty crayon. Once again, I'll give it a color. And let's paint an area here. Now I'll move my image over the area. And I'll click and drag into it. And now you can see that my painted layer has basically masked my text. So we have the pixel layer and then the galaxy nested underneath it. And if I go back to my pixel layer, I can paint into it some more. Notice how if I go outside the edge, I'll start to see my red again, but I'll just undo that and paint like this. Now, a very common use of clipping masks is to control the area you paint in. So here I have two transparent images. You can see this is what they look like. Let's add some shadows to this apple here. So I'll add a pixel layer. I'll call it shadows. And I'll set it to multiply. That's typically what you do when you want to create shadows. I'll select my brush, select some gray. Now if I paint over here, you can see it's going outside of my apple. But I can take the shadow, drag it into the apple layer, and now the effect is limited to that area. So whenever I paint, it's just going to happen inside the apple. Maybe we want to add another layer that's highlights. So let's add a pixel layer. Let's set it to highlight. And maybe that'll be color dodge. And I can paint on this side to make it brighter. Maybe I want to make that leaf a little bit greener. I'll add another pixel layer. Let's call this color. I'll set the blend mode to color. Choose green. And there we have a greener leaf. So this is before, after, before, after. Now let's try the same thing with the green apple. I'll select the green apple. I'll add a pixel layer. I'll drag it inside. I'll call it shadow. Set it to multiply. Now we'll select my brush. And watch what happens now when I paint. it's not actually being clipped. And the reason this happens is because my green apple is an image layer. I can see this if I hover over this icon here. It says image. Whereas if I hover over my apple, it's a pixel layer. Now, if you're coming from Photoshop, you can think of an image layer as almost like a smart object. It's a way of non-destructively preserving our images. The downside is that we can't actually do some operations the same way we do with a pixel layer. I have a video explaining the difference between image layers and pixel layers. It's an important concept if you're using Affinity Photo. I'll leave a link down in the description below. But in the meantime, what I'll show you is how to get around this problem. So I'll delete this shadow layer. What I can do now is right-click on my green apple, and I can say rasterize. And now it is a pixel layer. And now I can go back, add another pixel layer, drag it in, set it to multiply, and any changes I make will just be limited to the green apple. Now, rasterizing has some other side effects. So like I said, check out my video on the difference between image and pixel layers. If there's any other Photoshop features you'd like to learn how to do in Affinity Photo, let me know down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.